Public outcry is growing after recent revelations about how technology giants like Facebook and Google collect and use our data. A new book, Exploding Data: Reclaiming Our Cybersecurity in the Digital Age, highlights the many dangers of modern technology and data collection. Author Michael Chertoff, former Secretary of Homeland Security under President George W. Bush, writes this in the book: "We have always been worried that Big Brother might force his way into our home. But Big Brother need not beat down the door. We are currently rolling out the red carpet to him." Chertoff is currently executive chairman and co-founder of the security consulting firm, the Chertoff Group. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning.
Glad to have you here. What do you mean rolling out the red carpet?
We are actually surveilling ourselves. We're doing a lot of the collection that we used to imagine would be the government as individuals. We go around, we take selfies, we photograph each other, we upload things to the internet. Other things are being collected on us, for example, video cameras, locational data on our cell phone, and all of this winds up in what they call the cloud, which is the servers which maintain all of this data. And so the person who operates the server can look all across these various uploads and construct a very accurate picture of everything we do every day. And that is why we have actually become Little Brother in the place of Big Brother.
You argue that the privacy ship has essentially already sailed, and that it's really autonomy we should worry about. Explain that concept.
Privacy means to most of us keeping things hidden behind closed doors or a private conversation. And what I've seen over the last several years is so much data is generated by us unwittingly that the idea that we're going to keep things behind closed doors really has become almost quaint. So now the question is, what happens when the data is generated? Do we have some control over it? And that, I think, is where the battleground is in terms of our freedom. Because if people have a 100% view of everything that we do all the time, then the ability to manipulate us and coerce us becomes a real issue.
Okay, but it is the wild, wild west out there. What control do we have over our data that we're putting out there?
So I think there are two things I suggest we need to think about. One is, what can we do as individuals? And part of that is being mindful when we do generate data. If we're asked to give our email address or to share locational data, we've got to make a mindful decision. Is it worth doing? The second thing is, I do think we need to have the courts and the government do some weighing of what the balance ought to be in terms of data control. We now have platforms that are so vast that they really are almost monopolies. And the condition of participating often is surrendering your data. And the question is whether we ought to put some limits on that and say, no, people have a right to say no without sacrificing their ability to access the platform.
And of course, what comes to mind are bad actors and nefarious actors, right, who want to steal that data. Is the government currently prepared or doing enough to protect American citizens from nefarious actors? You
know, the government's making progress, but the challenge is that most of the infrastructure is in private hands. And I'll give you a good example. We have the Internet of Things. We now have smart refrigerators, smart baby cameras. Those things are often not built with any security in mind. And that means they can be hijacked by bad actors, and then that becomes the portal to enter into the network and take the network over. So we need to start to put some standards in place about how to manufacture and deploy these devices, so there is a security element to it and we can protect ourselves.
So do you think we're going to continue to see more battles like we saw between Apple and the FBI as far as taking that data that had been stolen and accessing it?
Well, I think there are going to be challenges about how do we balance, for example, law enforcement's need for access with the need to protect data against bad actors through encryption. We're going to see battles about which law governs. Is it the U.S. law? Is it the Chinese law? Is it the Russian law? Is it the EU law? Because the global environment in which data operates doesn't have borders, but our laws do have borders. So these are all challenges in terms of taking our laws and our policies into the 21st century.
And where does, in terms of any regulations, where do you think it best is applied? Is it through laws, through Congress, which has sometimes been a little bit behind on this thing? Or, as a former member of the executive branch, is this something that's done through executive agencies somehow?
I mean, some of it can be done through administrative agencies. You have the FTC, for example, or the FCC have certain regulatory powers. So does DHS. It would be great if Congress could do something in this area, but you're quite right, they've not always been successful in doing it. The courts are going to play a role. You know, there's been discussion of the Supreme Court today. The Supreme Court is actually beginning to look at this set of issues. There was a case just a few weeks ago called Carpenter having to do with the ability to access locational cell phone data.
Right.
And you could see the justices beginning to wrestle with the very issues we're talking about in the book. How do we control the data once it's been generated? So I think the courts are actually going to play a major role in this.
Finally, can I just ask you, since you're the former head of the Department of Homeland Security, what do you think should be going on with reuniting these children with their families?
Well, I think we ought to reunite the children as quickly as possible. I don't know how they've distributed them, but it seems to me it's a big priority to make sure that every kid is accounted for and then returned to the family.
In a bureaucracy, what's the fastest way to get a complicated problem like this moving? Because it's clearly not moving very fast.
Well, I tell you, the courts are actually pretty, have a lot of capability in terms of prompting the agencies. And I'm sure at this point, there is a strong desire to get this thing done as quickly as possible. The difficulty is if you didn't front load the process by telling where people were going to go and keeping track of them, it does become difficult after the fact. And I'm sure they're working hard to do it, and I'm sure the judges are going to really, you know, kind of jab them.
These reunifications are not happening fast enough. So Michael Chertoff, thank you so much. Great to have you on set.
Thank you.
Good to be on.